Hiya, so this is the next part of making Eriks the beautiful duffle coat. So we're on to the hood, and then after the hood things start getting a little bit complicated, but it's okay because step by step we're gonna do it. You might hear some background noise because my son's here playing and stuff. So this is where we were at. I love this colour. I feel like he needs a pair of like mustard coloured wellies to go with his coat. Anyway, hood. So what we're going to do, Ethan, mummy's videoing now, remember? Thank you. So with the right sides together, match it up. So I'm using that as my right side because I've got the markings ready for the next bit. So you just put these together, pin them if you want to. It's a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. And you use slightly small stitch margin, line, size, length. Here we go. So do it all the way around, 1/4 inch. Doesn't say anything about sprucing at one side and top stitching or anything. So you do have to fold your front edge back, so I would say when you do that, open up your seam allowance. Ethan, thank you. Where's my blue pen? So you press back the front edge of the hood by 1 centimetre and sew through all the layers to hem. So I'm just going to mark this out, 1 centimetre. Just so you know, hooks on the telly behind me, so I'll get a bit excited in a minute because I love this film. Robin Williams is just a fantastic actor. Right, so fold this edge back. I'm going to pin it in place. And Maggie Smith's in it as well, she's awesome. So it's New Year's Eve, everybody. New Year's Eve. Do we have any New Year's resolutions? If you do, let me know what yours are, if they're sewing related especially. I've got lots to think about before I do mine. Every year I do a wish list, a sewing bucket list. And I put all these things on there and I get all excited. I'm going to sew it all. And then I don't get through it. So I think I need to be much more realistic this year. Much more realistic. Because it's very disheartening when you have and also like last year, because it was lockdown as well, I went and bought a load of stuff. I bought stuff to make Waldorf dolls. It's all in the sewing area, not been used. Maybe that should be my first one, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's sew this 1 centimetre seam on the hood. So I'm just at the double seam, so I'm just going to take it a bit easier there.
Pretty much I do. Do that. Give me that. I need a flush.
Ethan. I just noticed I've got lily pollen on my finger.
Oh, you do.
It stained my wall, so I cut all the little stemmy bits out, so we're getting more staining. Good job on painting that wall, isn't it, this year? So that's that. So this is it the correct way out. So now this is where you're going to put your hood onto your neckline. And it looks so complicated. It really does. So it says with right sides together. So this is your right side and that is your right side. It says match up the hood to the neckline, lining up the hood front edge with the notches and tack it in place. Then you fold your facing back. Now this bit here is your facing. To sum the hood, and then you pin that in place, and then you sew around the whole neckline from one front edge to the other with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Sew the front facing back at hem to a depth of 1 centimetre, which is this.
2, 5,
Down.
8 of them.
And then it says trim the excess off the corners, trim the facing layer of the hem away, and trim the neck seam allowance down to a 1/4 inch all the way around. Push corners back through at the bottom here, and then that's the front of your coat done. So let's put that into more practical. So the middle of the hood, I'm going to line up with the middle of the back and pin it. Now when you open this up, you'll notice that this blue line here matches this blue line here, which is the beginning of where that like shoulder paddy bit fitted. So we'll pin it there, and then we match that on the other side, which is there. And then this bit here will finish it. So when you've got your drew notches on, that is where that finishes. Perfecto. Now your seams here are getting quite thick now because of all these layers that we've got, which is why later on you're going to reduce the bulk by trimming it all back. But in the meantime, you've got those pins in place and your hood is in the position it needs to be in. We're just going to base stitch that along there, basically to hold it in place. In the book it says tack in place. I call it base stitching. It's basically your longest stitch, and it's just to hold it in place. This stitching then can be removed later on if needs be, if it's visible. So I'm going to go slow and steady because these are very thick seams. You don't want to ram it through, you just very gently want to feed it all through, keeping all those layers together. See, that already has moved up a bit, so I need to move that back down. In place. I'm trying to stay in that 1/4 inch seam margin if I can, just so I don't have to pick up the stitches later. But obviously it's not a big problem to do because it's so loose. You're not going to fasten it at either end. It's not going to be difficult to remove. That was feeling a bit thick. When you're doing this moving around, be careful you don't bend your needle over or move the position, and when you go to come down your needle ends up hitting the plate underneath because you've shifted it sideways. Nothing worse, because then your needle bends and snags and snaps, and potentially you could damage the fabric you're working on. So that is now kind of secure, but only base stitched. It's not going to unravel in your hands, but it's also going to be very easy to unpick. Remember to put your seam allowance back once you finish your step. So if your next bit will be like that, and then you could come up with the issues of it unraveling at some stage in the future. I'll move my stitch allowance back. So now it tells you to fold the front facing back to sandwich. So you've got dotty lines. I'm just going to get that piece out again. See if it tells us. CF. What does CF mean? Yes. So that dotted line
Bye-bye.
is the line that you're folding back.
Dog. Must be the key.
But you're doing it that way.
I need to go in there.
So it's like it's folding back on itself. And then when you undo it, your hood is nicely in that seam. So the dashed line, which is that one, is where you're folding it, which lines up that mark with that mark. So, is that right on that line? Yeah. And it just says to pin this, it doesn't say to base stitch it. For the front facing back to sandwich hood and pin in place, so around the neckline, yeah. So you don't have to base stitch it, but I would pin it a couple of times. So I'm pinning it down here on the fold. Then I'm going to pin it again here in the hood, just to keep that in place. And then you repeat that on the other side. Mandy Hawk. You're only going to do that without that. So what it's doing is it's holding that hood in place. It's encasing it into that seam and gives it a nice, beautiful, neat edge when you unfold it all. So it says a 1 centimetre. So the front facing back at the hem to a depth. So I've gone one step ahead. Sew around the neckline on one front edge to the other with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is going to be thick and clunky, so nice and steady. So you just go from one end to the other at 1/4 inch. This is probably the thickest part, actually, this bit here. Just making sure it all stays like that. So when you're coming up on this end, second bit, make sure that facing lies nice and flat and doesn't kink and buckle up underneath the foot. Just keeping that all nice and flat.